Okay, first of all, can I just say, since we passed another momentous Thursday, can I just take this opportunity to thank all the frontliners and the NHS for the amazing job they've done over the last 2.5 months. I'm here because I feel that Gary said something a couple of days ago, and I think that he was absolutely wrong. And I often let things go, but I think that when you go after somebody and you've made a lot of wrong and incorrect statements, then by letting it go will not do the benefit to the public of listening to fake information. Gary mentioned about Carlos down-tooling and his professionalism, and he also mentioned that there were problems in his second year about talking about people talking in his ear, his people talking in his ear. So generally, I have 3 comments and 3 questions for Gary. In terms of the people that he claims were talking into his ear, I'd like to know who he thinks were talking into his ear and what they think they were saying in his ear, because unless he was hacking them or taping him, impossible for him to know what they were apparently saying in his ear. And I'd like to know who those people are. Furthermore, I think, I must apologize. I gave an incorrect stat during my previous interview. I said Gary played 4 times in that year. He actually played 1 time in Carlos's first year, because unfortunately Gary was injured, and he played 10 minutes against Rome. When Gary made a comparison between year 1 and year 2, Gary could not have known too much about year 1 because he played 10 minutes that year, not 4 times, as I correctly said. And he was mostly in the treatment table, and that's the actual year that he actually said good things about Carlos. And finally, I think that Sir Alex Ferguson was one of the greatest managers of my time. And irrespective on what side of the hairdryer you were, you had nothing but respect for the man. The one thing that I think that I learned in my time about Sir Alex was that he had his finger to the pulse all the time. And he was a strong coach. He knew what his players were doing in the training ground, off the training ground, at home, on a weekday. And by Gary making those comments of the second year, he's in somewhat questioning whether or not Sir Alex had his finger to the pulse, because Sir Alex picked Carlos 51 times during that season of 2008-2009. 51 times. He picked Rooney 49 times, Berbatov 44 times. And Gary himself only played 29 in that season. In those moments, Carlos played 51 games, picked by Sir Alex, 15 goals, 7 assists. Berbatov, 14 goals, 11 assists, and Rooney, 20 goals, 13 assists. Sir Alex would not have picked someone 51 times during that season, as Gary well knows, if they were down-tooling or being unprofessional, unless Gary thinks that Sir Alex took his eye off the ball.
You want me to answer? I'll answer the 3 questions one by one, Keir. I mean, in terms of the first one, the period in Christmas season when it was quite obvious that Manchester United weren't going to exercise the option, there is no doubt that Carlos, in that last few months of the season, became disinterested, distracted. He wasn't the same around the training pitch. He went into a more of a sulky mood because he was disappointed that the club weren't signing him. He definitely played. He was in the first. You're a madman, you. This is serious stuff, and you're messing around. No, he definitely. I mean, Keir, you'll know that Carlos was definitely not the same player in the last 5 months of the season. I mean, I don't know what stats you're referring to there, but ultimately, what I did yesterday, I looked at the Premier League and the Champions League stats of Carlos over the sort of the 2 seasons. And it refers to the third question. I don't know if we've got them, but you can see that Carlos in the first season, I said on the 2 days ago that Carlos was amongst the best front 3 that I've ever seen in the Premier League. So these are the stats in the Premier League from 2007-8 and 2008-9. You can see in the first 6 months there, Kia, that Carlos played 18 times for Manchester United starts and 7 goals. In the second 6 months, he had 13 and he had 7 goals. But if you look at the last 6 months, Carlos, to be fair, at that point was only getting... In the last year, he only played 18 times, which is the same as the first 6 months in its entirety. And he only had 5 goals in his second season in the Premier League. So Carlos's performances in the second year dipped. And the same in the Champions League. He scored a lot less goals. So, look, my view is there were definitely other complications that Carlos had in terms of the club not triggering his option. You've admitted that. And I saw Carlos in the last 5 months at the club. I don't need to do my research on this. I was watching the boy. And the thing about Carlos is, Carlos was a warrior on the football pitch. He was the mayor. In the first 12 months at Manchester United, I've never seen anything more brilliant than him with Wayne Rooney and Cristiano Ronaldo. However, in the last 4 months, the drop in his manner and his performances, just because he was obviously not being taken on by the club, was alarming. When I refer to the people in his ear, I mean, it is true that Carlos was owned by third-party ownership. At that time, it was legal, obviously, and there's no problem with it. But I think Manchester City paid sort of £50 million for Carlos Tevez to his owners, whereas Manchester United were paying £25 million, or were supposed to pay £25 million, I believe, for the option. And I just felt at that moment in time there was so much distraction around the third-party ownership. There was so much noise about how much the third-party owners were going to make. These were things that were in Carlos's ear all the time. The club weren't exercising his option. He wasn't being picked in the team as much because he was substitute. Those appearances that you name, a lot of them were substitute appearances. So he was definitely a different person in that last 5 months at the club. Now, what I would say is that down tools might be a little bit crass, but Carlos was distracted, he was different, and he certainly wasn't anywhere near the level in that last 4 months at the club. You must accept that.